Hey there everyone, this is Bob Martin, the RCSubGuy with the NautilusDryDocks.com, and I'm really excited today to share with you this project. It's super unique, a very cool little model. I love driving it and I can't wait to share it with you. So taking a look at this particular model, you'll see that it's a little bit different than the standard kind of submarine, although it does share a few characteristics with something like the German 212 air-independent propulsion submarine out of Germany. But this is not a German submarine. This is actually Swedish, of the Swedish Navy. And I'm sure I'm going to butcher the class, but I believe it's Sjoormen is the class. HSwMS Sjöhunden class submarine. And this particular boat, and I'm going to need a cheat sheet here, is modeled after the Sjöhunden, or Sjö for short. And I know that because it has Sjö written on the top of the sail. All right, everyone, as I tend to do, we're going to kick this video off by throwing this thing in the pool, and we'll show you how it works. We'll run the ballast system through its paces, get it under the water, and see if we can show you what kind of speed it has and the response to the dive planes and rudder. Bit of a spoiler, this is a beautiful boat. I love driving it, tons of fun, very responsive. Let's go take a look. So there's a bit of background on this specific RC submarine. It was part of a bundle of boats that I picked up from the daughter of a gentleman who unfortunately passed away. But as such, I did not have a lot of information about where this particular boat came from. I scoured the internet looking to see if there were kit manufacturers that made kits of this particular boat, and I came up dry. Unfortunately, we thought maybe we clued into a really limited production of boats that were manufactured here in the US. That turned out to be a little different as well. Those boats look different than this one is. So it's a little bit of a mystery, but it is certainly a pleasant one because it is a very well put together model. I'm super excited to share it with you, show you a little bit more about the construction, how it was put together, and more importantly, how it works. All right, this boat is, as I said, modeled after the Sjoe, and it is 1/48th scale, which puts it in at 41.5 inches in overall length. It is fiberglass construction throughout, with looks like cast resin appendages and a really unique brass prop. I'm not very familiar with this class of boat, but you can see they're actually forward swept propeller blades, which is really unique. But that propeller certainly moves this boat along really well in the water. Of course, the one thing that you're going to notice on this, compared to a lot of the boats that I've put together over the years, is the X rudders in the back of the boat. These are really fun to drive because what you end up with are 4 control surfaces all working together to move the boat in whichever direction you're going, as opposed to the cruciform style where there is only going to be 2. And I recently read a scientific article that says that this style of control surface actually has increased turning force on the boat to the amount of 1.41 to 1. So 1.4 times as efficient as that cruciform style of control surface setup. Taking a look at the cylinder that you can see out here, this appears to have been a one-off fabrication by somebody who really knew what they were doing. If this is a commercially available cylinder, I have never seen one like it before. And it's quite old, I would say. Realistically, based on the electronics that were in it when I got it, it was probably at least a decade old. I gutted it though, and all of the components that are inside are now modern. So we can see these really beefy O-ring seals, and I will say that once these sit, they do get a little stiff, and you have to pry them off. But the cool thing about this, just like our new line of MSD cylinders, it's completely modular. So all of this completely comes apart. And when I did some repairs and refurbishment of the ballast system, it was very easy to pull it apart, make all of the adjustments and modifications that I needed to, and put it all back together again. Let's just take a quick look at this. In the front here, you can see my test tube. This is just a clear air hose, and I cap it off. I uncap it for testing, dunk the cylinder, blow into it, and look for bubbles. Super simple. Keep it coiled up in the front of the boat when not in use. Other cool thing about this, it came with these charging ports. Now originally I think the owner did this as a bit of a lazy man's way of charging up the batteries so that he didn't have to open it up every time. I don't believe in that. I think it's silly to keep a compartment for a submarine sealed when not in use. I think you should leave it open in case even one drop of water happened to have got in there and you didn't spot it. So, but the cool thing about this, these studs still exist, so if you wanted to, you could actually tap off of the remote switch and have a lighting circuit come out and power up LED lights. If you were so inclined, it would be very easy to do. I have a pair of 1500 milliamp hour lithium polymer batteries, so a 3 amp power pack in the front there. And as I mentioned, we have a remote on-off switch so that you don't have to crack into the model at all to turn it on and off. On the top you can see this port, and in the previous setup there was actually a mechanical switch underneath, and you simply open that up, flick the switch to turn it on and off, and seal it back up again. It's now kind of going to sit there forever because there's no need to crack into it anymore. Going into the ballast system, this is a gas-style ballast system. You can see the pressure vessel made from PVC pipe in the bottom, and a really, really slick mechanical linkage there that actuates the vent valve and the blow valve that you can see right up in the top there. Basically that linkage comes out through, and it's rotary in nature, moves that little arm, and then the cam moves up and down, and one direction vents and one direction blows. And you know, the other interesting thing about this is the charging port for the gas style ballast system, and that's all embedded internally within this bulkhead. So really interesting setup, and as I said, just really well engineered. I'm very impressed. Going into the motor compartment of the cylinder, you can see the ballast servo mounted to that interior bulkhead there. And then we got some new components. We've got an electronic speed controller, 40 amp capacity with the built-in electronic or battery eliminator circuit. One thing that I did keep in there, because it works really well, is this X-tail unit, and that's basically what mixes electronically the impulses from the rudder and the rear dive planes to activate the rear control surfaces. Got an APC4 automatic pitch controller, a battery and link monitor that's set up. That's your fail-safe device in case of loss of signal or low battery. Slick unit, I love them. 6-channel FM receiver. We've got the two original linear servo converted servos for rudder and rear dive planes. And this is actually a pair of battery eliminator components that were put in there. They're not connected right now, but certainly if you wanted to run some more high output electronics, those are there and very easily hooked up again. Looking at the bottom, you can see the main drive motor that runs through a gear assembly and right out the back output shaft there. And that's basically it. It's a simple but really effective cylinder, easily transferred, you know, to another model of similar size. So very cool. You can see here, just on the end, we got 16th inch stainless steel push rods for the two outputs for the rear control surfaces, as well as this little piece of tubing that has the receiver antenna run outside. And this is how it was set up. Pretty slick idea actually by the original owner. Just kind of runs through and then gets pinched off with this little plug in the back. This is the radio system that got set up for the model. You can see our remote on-off switch dangling on the back there. A little key fob turns the model on and off. The way that I've got it set up is we've got our pitch control override, because there is obviously autonomous functionality for that automatic pitch controller to keep the model level. Got rudder and throttle, and then on the back we've got our ballast system controls. So very simple, straightforward. This is a great radio system. I've had great luck with them. All right, let's talk about gaining access to the interior of the boat. And again, that is fairly straightforward. This is a really well laid up hull, and the seams are really tight. It looks really, really good. Underneath, in the bottom of the bow here, there's actually, and I can see if I can lift this up, a small access hole right here. And inside is a stainless steel bolt, and that passes up through and into the upper hull, and that's what holds it together. So I've got that loosened off already. You just simply lift up, slide it forward, and that is it. Taking a look at the inside of the hull, you can see that hold down that I was mentioning before. This piece of brass tubing comes up, and it's well encapsulated in a resin blob in the front. So that bolt passes up through and into that little piece of fiberglass that houses the retaining nut. One interesting thing about this, you can see that there is, you know, a section of fiberglass in the bow, but there's none along the entire length of that upper hull. The boat actually trimmed out beautifully without the need of additional flotation above the surfaced waterline. Underneath you can see a lot of this lead in the keel, self-adhesive, and these are actually duck weights that I put in there to get everything working really, really well. With all of this weight in the keel, this boat has some tremendous static stability, so it just operates beautifully. Taking a look in the back here, I'm going to see if I can get this in place without looking. There's our drive shaft for our propeller. Again, super smooth. I can't detect any looseness, rattling, or anything in that drivetrain. And then we've got our X rudders, one on this axis and one on the other, and you can see that they are linked across from each other. So as you move this, the corresponding rudder on the other side operates, and the same thing on this side. So to see this in operation is actually really, really fun to watch, and it results in tremendous performance advantage of this boat. It's a ton of fun to run in enclosed environments such as a large swimming pool or small pond, because it has just a tremendous turning radius. All right, let's get this thing ready for the pond. And grab the cylinder, which is all self-contained and ready to install. Grab it in the middle here, and what we're going to need to do is get that drive shaft aligned to the output there. You've got this tab and the block in the back, and that's what keeps the cylinder in alignment. I'm just going to drop the front down here, and then we're going to line up this linkage shaft and slip these collars over, and that's what locks them down and in place in both left and right sides. So that is what that looks like after you've got that section hooked up and ready to go. You can see those wheel collars, like I said, lock it in place. I am not going to tighten them down yet though, and I will show you why in a moment. So on both sides you've got these little T pieces with some brass tubing, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to feed the receiver antenna through these pieces of tube on the port side, on the left side. And what that does is it stretches it out along the entire length of the boat, and that's going to result in some great reception. Now what we can do, grab the front of the cylinder, pull it back towards the stern, and then push the nose down so it fits behind this little retaining clip. And there's that little tab that I was telling you about that just drops down, and that stops the cylinder from sliding forward once it has been locked down. Now what we need to do is to address this hose, and we're just going to coil it up nice and neat in this front section. Suppose what you could probably do is use a zip tie and just keep it kind of permanently tucked up, and only break that apart when you need to test the watertight integrity of your cylinder. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to turn my radio on, extend the antenna, and turn the model on. You can see those linkages kind of cycled there. And what I did that was to get these servos in their neutral position. So they're now lined up in their middle position, which means that when I adjust my rudder linkages and tighten down this set screw, when I move my linkages, they'll be set up for the proper throw. And we can give them a little test here with our override. There's our rear dive plane controls and our rudder controls.
So let's talk about how these X-shaped rudders actually work. All of them work in concert together to provide the maximum amount of surface area to move the rear, the stern part of the boat. So to dive, all four are moving, they're pushing the water down, the stern comes up and the model dives. Opposite, obviously, for surfacing, to go left and right. So if I were to steer to port, all of the control surfaces are pushing the water this way, the stern goes over this way, and the model turns to the right. And if we go the opposite way, then the model is going to go to port. Now, if we take a look at this and say we wanted to dive and go to port, we're going to dive and go to port. You can see these control surfaces are basically leveled right now, maybe pushing down a little bit, but these ones are swinging that the stern to starboard, so the entire model will move to port. It's really fun to watch, and this setup gives tremendous response.
All right, the next thing that we are going to do is prepare the ballast system, and that requires fueling up the liquid air in that reservoir with some airbrush propellant. This is Badger brand Propel, available from any hobby store or online merchant that carries such materials. In order to use it, you need this adapter, this filler adapter that goes on the top. Those are available at my store, but obviously it's going to be coming with this model. I'm going to take the cap off here. The model's powered on right now. I'm going to keep the transmitter close by, and I'm going to just double check the function of the ballast system. So if I push down on channel 5, which is on the back there, we're going to vent the tank. In theory, all the air would be coming out of this valve on the top, and if I go the other way, that blows the tank. You can see this little plunger right here depresses that Schrader valve. So what we want is the blow cycle to be handy, and what we're going to do, we are going to, in a very positive and firm manner, depress the can onto that nozzle on the top. And we're going to hold it there and let that liquid flow into the reservoir, and then we're actually going to activate the blow cycle for a few seconds in a few burps. And what that does is it cools down the reservoir and allows more of that air to enter there in the liquid state versus gaseous state, which gives you more blow cycles. So now we can check the functionality by hitting our blow. And it's blowing gas in there. Everything looks like it is in good shape. Put that lid back on, and we are set to go. And the last thing that we need to do is put these retaining clips on, and these are actually labeled in marker there, S, M, and B being stern, middle, and bow. And all these do basically is slip over these little brass T-connectors, and they stop the cylinder from being able to move vertically, because it can't move horizontally now because of those mounts that we talked about earlier on. So those just slip right in place, just like that. 1, 2, and 3 bow, middle, and stern retaining clips. The model is basically at this time ready for having the upper hull put on. It's going to slip it in place. Once we take our retaining bolt, put that up through the bow, it will be locked down and ready for the pond. All right, I want to take just a moment and talk about best practices when it comes to maintenance and upkeep of this model submarine, but any model submarine at all. The one thing that I want to make sure that we cover on this is that between every session, I highly recommend, as I mentioned earlier, that you open up each end of the watertight cylinder and allow air to get in there. If even a few drops of water get in without you realizing it, if you keep it on the shelf for a few months, that water could potentially corrode sensitive electronics and you end up with a failure down the road, which is not anything that you want. So keeping it in an open state for storage is something that I highly recommend, even though it's going to take up a little bit more room than just keeping it all in one package on the shelf. The other thing is you're going to want to make sure that anything rubber that is used for a seal is kept well lubricated. I recommend a silicone oil to utilize with these O-rings. That's not going to attack the rubber, and it's going to allow for much more friction-free movement of linkages, drive shafts, etc. So lubrication of those seals, highly important. Likewise, utilizing that same silicone oil, just a drop or two in the bushings of your control surfaces are going to help make sure that those move in a frictionless manner as well, and keep the amount of work that your servos need to do down to a minimum, help eliminate binding in your linkages and drivetrain. From an exterior perspective, after every run, I highly recommend wiping the model down. If you've been in like a pond or a swimming pool, it's a great idea to rinse your model down with fresh water. Just make sure that there's no chemicals or minerals that are going to attack the paint job. And then once you rinse it all down, wipe it down with a soft cloth. One thing that this nice black paint job tends to like to do is show water spots. So if you just wipe it down with a soft cloth afterwards, help reduce the odds of a cosmetic mar on your beautiful RC submarine. Before every run, make sure that you test your watertight cylinder on the bench for complete and proper operation. Run it through its paces, make sure that it's working properly. I also highly recommend taking that cylinder, dunking it in your bathtub or your pool by itself. Utilize that rubber hose that we talked about earlier. Blow in there, make sure no leaks have showed up out of the blue. You do not want to find out that a leak is developed while your boat is underway. That is not something that is highly recommended. So take the time before you go. It could take you all of 5 minutes, and it could prevent a lot of angst down the road from a lost or damaged submarine. Well, that's it. That's all. You made it through the entire video. Congratulations. You toughed through all the technical talk, learning about this really cool Swedish submarine in 1/48 scale. Thanks for joining me. If you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear from you. Email me anytime, bob@rc-sub.com. If you like what you see, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I try and put videos out on a regular basis for you guys. Check out my website at nautilusdrydocks.com. There's lots of cool stuff there, parts, kits, components, information, and resources just for you to learn about the hobby or to continue your journey within it. Again, my name is Bob Martin, the RCSubGuy with the nautilusdrydocks.com. Thanks for joining me, everyone. We'll catch you next time.